So 10 years on, we have a sequel for Volgarr The Viking, Volgarr The Viking 2. I'm so excited to bring you this review. Just let me be clear before we start here. Digital Extremes did provide me a review code, but I am be 100% honest in my opinion here and mention pros and cons of the sequel to a game series I've really only been introduced to in the last year. I've only recently beaten the first game. What a high and low experience, but ultimately so rewarding. Let's get into the review of the sequel. I think you need important context when reviewing this type of game. You have to remember the original Volgarr the Viking drew heavy inspiration from classics like Ghouls and Ghosts and Rastan. And I think the most important thing for anybody who has played the original game extensively will understand that the game simply didn't compromise on its skill-based design. And trust me, it's the same situation for the sequel. The game is tough as nails, much like the first, but also introduces some of those welcome changes, and I think it also has implemented a brilliant way for players of all skills to give it a go without straying from its core vision. It's a tough game, please be warned, but also rewarding, and the sequel does not let up. Seriously, be prepared to die. And I mean die a lot. But the thing is, when you die, you learn from those mistakes, and that's what's key. The key difference between the sequel, I think one of the most important and welcome changes, is that the game saves at mid-tier checkpoints, even if you leave the game. And this actually addresses a major gripe from the original game. Now, some big fans who've beaten the original game might get a little bit triggered to hear that. However, trust me, it does not compromise on the difficulty, because there is also subtle changes on how the levels are designed, how continues actually work, and there is now lives introduced into this system. Basically, you're rewarded for progressing through the game without getting hit, dying, or losing continues. However, if you do the opposite and you die over and over and expire lives and continue, the game still will allow you to progress, and you'll even be able to take free hits without even losing your items. However, you're ultimately playing in what's now called zombie mode. So basically, this is a free-for-all, no hit, stroll through the level and not really worry about getting hit. But that is what's classed as its easy mode. Ultimately, that mode is really not rewarding at all. You could in theory move towards the end of the game, but ultimately the game will punish you by giving you the worst ending possible. Now, there is one thing about zombie mode, it's not without its faults. When I first used all my continues and actually entered zombie mode, it wasn't immediately clear what I actually had to do next. I really didn't want to play in zombie mode. I wanted to go and actually beat the game properly. Practicing in this mode was kind of impractical for me because getting hit really didn't matter. So it was just kind of leading to the lack of focus on memorizing attack patterns and jump timings. Look, ultimately for me, that's not how I learn and how I progress through these games. I do it by repetition and understanding those attack patterns. But basically, what you needed to do was delete the save slot to start again. Again, this wasn't very apparent at first, but it makes so much sense once you finally understand the game's design. Look, in essence, zombie mode is useful for newbies to get a taste of the game, but if you really want to get the experience of the challenge, you just gotta get good. So on to presentation. The level design is top notch, and as I mentioned, it's much bigger. The levels are much bigger. There are 6 in total, but again, double or triple the scope in size of the original game. Again, it's building on that original look, but the environments also are a little bit more intricate. It's still got that old school pixelated art design, which I loved from the first one. And the only maybe gripe on its presentation, again, is the music hasn't all that much improved from the original game. You have to remember it gets a little bit repetitive because you're going to be dying so often. So just keep that in mind. If you've kind of maybe the music griped on you after a while in the first game, it's really not going to change all that much here in the sequel. I do want to mention briefly about the punchier sound effects. They sound absolutely great, especially when you're grabbing power-ups. They've definitely enhanced them, and they sound much better than the original game. On to controls as well. I'm playing this actually effectively on the Steam Deck, 60 FPS out the gap, verified. I'm nearly certain it will be at this stage, and it plays brilliantly in handheld mode. I haven't to touch any version of Proton or tweak any settings in any way, and I've received this game maybe 3 or 4 weeks in advance. So this is the pre-release version, and what I can say is technically flawless from my perspective. Now lastly, I do want to briefly mention its replay value before I get on to the conclusion. Again, the incentive ultimately to get the best ending is what drives this game's replay value. I've put 18 hours into this game already, and I still haven't beaten the sequel. I've only beaten the first game, bear in mind, a couple of weeks ago. So the challenge is massive, and again, I'm trying to get not even the best ending, but a decent ending, let's just say. Look, each run on any given level never feels stale as you slowly improve your skills, you memorize the enemy placements, and that precision platforming challenge just gets higher and higher the further you move into the game. The process of mastering this game and striving for its best outcomes is what keeps me hooked. I cannot let the game down. Ultimately, let's go on to Volgarr The Viking 2 and my conclusion and my final thoughts. It's honestly brought some welcome changes from the original game without compromising the level of difficulty and skill required to beat it at its highest level. Never mind get the best endings, which is another level of challenge altogether. Just the game is designed to be mastered. I can just see this going to have speed runs and perfect run galore as players try to outdo themselves and continue to hold their skins over the next couple of years. It's just a game you can play over and over again like the first game, and it's just constantly pushing you to improve. I personally adore this series since picking up the first game on the stream this year, and I'm so happy that I get to share the second game. It's been well worth it, folks. It's a brilliant game. You really should invest in Volgarr The Viking 2. Hopefully, folks, this has been informative for people, and if you're new to the channel, please consider supporting my work by liking and subscribing. I will see you on the live stream soon of Volgarr The Viking 2. Let's do this. Thanks for watching, folks.